Thanks a lot, Praveen. It's always a privilege to be in the ICN conference. Uh, uh, to the audience, thank you. Thank you for the opportunity for us to be the last panel to be speaking to you at the end of what has clearly been a long day. We will try to be efficient while doing justice to what is clearly the most important topic of the day. When Praveen mentioned the topic to me, mission 2 trillion, mission impossible, my question was, of course not for this group, not for this audience. So this session today is not a question of whether India can be a $2 trillion chemical industry. This session is about how India can be a $2 trillion chemical industry. So in today's discussion, with this August panel, that's a discussion that we will be conducting. We will try to keep the discussion for about 45 minutes so that we have 15 minutes in the end for Q&A. That's the agenda for the day. We will have a series of questions that we will work with our panel to cover as we progress along. The first, we really wanted to start off with our eminent Professor Yadav to really lay the context for this journey. So Professor Yadav, from your perspective, when you think about 2047 and the $2 trillion Indian goal, what do you think is needed from the industry and the academia and the government and other stakeholders to make this dream come true?
Well, 2047 when India will be, are you able to hear me? Yeah, okay. When India will be 100 years independent nation, we want to be literally $30 trillion economy. And, $30 trillion, not 40, $30 trillion. Okay? So, first of all, is it possible and what? But there are important issues to be addressed first. First is, you are talking about net zero goal, right? Industry requires energy. So my personal belief is that it is not net zero goal, but net negative goal. If you are going to burn your carbon, carbon should be used for making chemicals, materials and all, and not for burning as a fuel. Okay, very important. So at the same time, we are committed to this so-called net zero goal by 2070. My question is, why not 2050 like others are doing? And do you know how much carbon dioxide we emit today? 2.622 billion tons of carbon dioxide India emits today. And that is out of 35.6 rather billion tons of carbon dioxide globally. So if we want to reduce that carbon intensity, carbon footprint, at the same time have energy for our industry to grow, very important that each and every atom of carbon must go into the final product. And we have these different sectors of economy. You start with bulk chemicals, organic chemicals, inorganic chemicals, specialty chemicals, pharmaceuticals and whatnot. My personal belief is that India will grow at a much faster rate in specialty chemicals and pharmaceuticals. Of course, in the bulk chemicals, and where is the feedstock? Your crude oil is going to be over by 2050. So our feedstock will be renewable carbon or waste carbon. So any carbon which is being wasted in any form, whether it is agri-waste or anything else, that has to be converted into useful energy. And this is where hydrogen will score. Hydrogen will be the savior of the world. Number one. Number two, carbon dioxide will be a new oil. Instead of when the oil is not there, carbon dioxide should be converted into a variety of chemicals. For example, we can convert it into hydrocarbons, LPG, higher hydrocarbons. We can convert that into methanol, dimethyl ether, formic acid, and also green hydrogen. We go into green ammonia, right? So our feedstock will be water. Our feedstock will be air, which are the cheapest. And then all these biomass will be our feedstock. Our biomass will be our feedstock. So that biomass has to be converted. So once again, hydrogen will play a very important role. So our government's policy should be to encourage hydrogen economy, give incentive for hydrogen economy. Like in the Western world, America is giving $3 per kg, incentive for green hydrogen. Our power ministry said 50 rupees first year, 40 rupees second year, 30 rupees third year. That is not going to help. it has to be at least 150 rupees to start with. Then, most important thing is water. Water is going to be a precious commodity, and industry has to reuse ZLD, so-called ZLD, and using water by any and all means is very important for the industry. And last but not least, we are talking about plastics and polymers. Polymer industry will also grow, but then you require bio-based polymers, biodegradable polymers, depolymerization of the existing polymers. Right now what is happening, our government has a policy to ban everything. Ban doesn't solve any problem. Ban means like you ban liquor, more liquor is sold in the state. Okay, so no ban. That leads to corruption. So depolymerization by using processes like aminolysis, ammonolysis, methanolysis, glycolysis, and above all, hydrogenation and hydrogenolysis. If we use that, we will get that hydrocarbon back into the economy. And the other part, like for example, you have a mixture of say PVC, nylon or PP and PE, all those things can be converted back into monomers, hydrocarbons, because it is hydrogen which is going to play the role. Again, both hydrogen and oxygen will give us these chemicals where biomass is to be used. So India can do it. First and foremost is the policy has to be right. Number two, the industry must follow strict norms. Why? Because once upon a time we thought China is going to be our competitor in everything. But you know what has happened? The supply chain management, you have to get chemicals from China. Our API industry cannot run if you don't get, products from China. So we have to have policies to encourage our industry so that we can become 2 trillion, even we can go to 3 trillion. But the model is start from there and come back, and what policy changes are required to do that. All industries must go for renewable feedstock. They must also recycle, reuse and all those things. Okay, that is also important. And an engineering viewpoint of view, that is called systems engineering approach. Only useful products go out, energy is recycled, and at the same time, you do retrosynthesis because it is again chemistry. So that you have minimum number of stages, maximum carbon efficiency or maximum efficiency, and also continuous processes, so that we don't have this hazard and all those things, because continuous processes are always safer and dedicated plants. Okay, so India can do it. India can do it. I strongly believe that, and that's last 2 sentences. Our manufacturing sector must grow at 25%. Our service sector must go at 70%. Then only we'll be able to achieve that, not otherwise.
Awesome. I was really inspired. Professor laid out the vision not just for us to be $2 trillion in chemicals, but $2 trillion in green chemicals. And $2 trillion not just in green chemicals, but in green chemicals with no global feedstock dependence. So he painted a vision where India is not dependent on global feedstock. We will have our own feedstock, and that is 100% green feedstock. That is a vision worth aspiring to. Thank you, sir. Building on what Professor said, I'll get to the next part. A key first building block in this journey is going to be the policy framework that enables it. I invite Mr. S. Ganesan to talk about what could be some policy building blocks that help us get toward the vision that Professor painted just now.
Great. Before coming here, I spoke to at least about half a dozen people connected with the chemical industry for long. This is the meeting I'm going to participate. What, in your opinion, is the important policy measures, policy reforms that we should consider on priority? So I just noted down 8 points. I'll quickly go over there and read it. You'll find it informative. Okay? Yes, thank you. Is it active? Yeah. Okay. Policy reforms that came from the people whom I spoke to, half a dozen people. Number one, it takes anywhere between 1 to 3 years from EIA, Environmental Impact Assessment, to CTO, Consent to Operate. Whereas outside India, it takes only a few months. I can vouch for this as one who is representing an Indian multinational. I know how much time does it take to set up a factory outside India. So this is the first one. Second, chemical unit chemical manufacturing units set up in even a notified industrial area should by default move to B2 category from the current A category. Now, what does it mean? It means that the environment clearance or environment impact assessment report, which are very cumbersome, time consuming, will be done away with in notified industrial estates. Okay. Now, there is no rationale at all. When I am setting up a chemical factory in a notified industrial area, who should I go through all these assessments? Because when a government notifies a particular industrial area as notified one, we presume that they have factored in all this. Number 3, deep sea discharge. Now, this is in practice right from 2004 in Gujarat. But so far, the government of India has not come out with separate norms for deep sea discharge. What is being used for surface water discharge one is being adopted for deep sea discharge also. This is unscientific. So this is another request from the industry member. Fourth, chemical companies are not allowed to change the product mix even when the total emission load does not increase. It takes anywhere between 6 months to 1 year to obtain permission from the pollution control department to change the product mix. By the time your market is gone completely. 4, rule number 9 of the Hazardous Substance Management Act introduced in 2016 does not allow captive consumption or sale of byproducts generated during manufacture. Remember, mind you, this was introduced only in 2016. The SOP, the standard operating procedure for each byproduct, needs to be jointly approved by a visit from the experts from State Pollution Control Board and Central Pollution Control Board, which never happens. It takes at least about 2 to 3 years, which is costly completely. The fourth point, the India's national chemical policy. Sorry, there's one more thing that the person who said that. So therefore, the so-called circular economy in chemical industry remains a non-starter. You are not allowed to use even the byproduct, whether it's in situ consumption or outside for sale, completely. And the national chemical policy, finalized in 2014, is yet to be introduced. Can we afford this kind of long delays? The vision of this policy is to accelerate growth and development of chemical industry so as to enable it to become a globally competitive major player. 10 years over, we are yet to see the light of the policy. And the last one is that, this is a comment actually. The importing chemicals is therefore easier than manufacturing it indigenously. And the final comment given is that our policy focus should be equally on import substitution and export promotion. While the import substitution reduces the foreign dependence and increases the employment opportunities locally, the export promotion fetches revenues from outside India. So these are the suggestions given. We can elaborate during question and answer session. I also have, if time permits, 4 slides to show. It's up to you. Okay. Yeah, I sent it to you. You don't have that? Okay. Because these 4 slides do carry slides which you rarely come across. And this applies to all subsectors of the chemical industry. So once it is loaded, probably I will come back and take the stage. It's coming? Okay. Takes only about 5 to 10 minutes. But then it has got lots of data. I want your complete attention irrespective of the subsectors that you represent. Okay. Look at it. This is the global GDP. Now this matters because the last slide is going to talk about 2 trillion economy. Now for chemical industry. When you look at it, 2 trillion economy looks great, but it is a plan and retrograde plan. We'll come to that. So this is how the growth has occurred. Look at the growth of the chemical industry that has occurred from 2005 when the global economy was going up. Next slide is in India. Professor, you mentioned about the share. India is the only, the current rank of India, 5th largest economy. India is the only major economy in the world where the share of agriculture sector is more than the manufacturing sector. Not only that, look at it. The share of manufacturing sector has come down from 17% 10 years ago now. When are we going to catch up with the 25%? That has been talked about for nearly 10 years now. Impossible. Okay? So this is the one. And here again it says that right from acquiring the land, setting a factory, everything is difficult. Therefore, so when the share is as low as 13%, it's not a problem per se, it's a symptom of a major problem, underlying problem. So this is it. Look at it. Now, what is least understood in the country is a strong correlation, strong relationship between chemical industry and merchandise goods export. Why has China become a major leader in merchandise export? Because of the massive investment in chemical industry, which is not at all coming up here. So if you want to improve the merchandise export, the focus should be in increasing the domestic production of chemicals. So that's a, look at it. The kind of trade surplus that China has been reporting and the kind of trade deficit we have been reporting. The CAGR growth is 14% for China on the plus side, and for us it is 8% on the minus side. And I think it's the last slide here. This is the latest one. Look at the last 10 years one. The growth of, I'll leave the slide here, you can even talk to me later, right? So, but I want your attention more than clicking photos. Look at the growth. Now, who is the one who is noticing all these? All these numbers are available in public domain. This is from WTO. By now, there ought to have been n number of discussions between the chemical industry and the policymakers as to what can be done about this. Sad. It does not happen so far. I think, yes, this is what. Be with me on the numbers. Look at it. Currently, India GDP is 3.4, and the size of chemical industry, it's all guesstimate, okay, it's about 220. The share, this is important. The current share of chemical industry in India GDP is 7%. Now, if we extrapolate everything, the India GDP is expected to be 38 trillion on the minimum side and 40 trillion on the maximum side. I'm quoting the minister, industry minister. This is the one. If you look at it, even if we achieve 2 trillion, our share, the share of chemical sector in India is set to go down from current level. So the thinking is something wrong. We really need to look at it. And in our opinion, that we should aim for a minimum 3.5 to 4. Now, what needs to be done, that calls for a different discussions altogether. But this should be the target. Now, this is one recent example. We all know that China is a leader in phosphate. Look at what they are saying. They said we want to have complete control on the entire chain of phosphorus-based compound. Right now, they are experts in basic chemicals, phosphorus-basic chemicals. They want to move. So these are the kind of planning that we should also have, the vision completely. I think that's all. So this is the final message. We need to plan big to stay competitive and outgrow others. Now, those of you who want to have this copy, you can write to me. This is my email. Okay. Thank you very much for the attention given. I could see all the eyes on the presentation. Okay. Thank you very much. And thanks for the opportunity given. Yes. Okay. I'll take questions later. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Mr. Ganesan. That was very, very informative. As opposed to the optimistic view for 2047, as always, the pessimistic view of the current has to be overcome. There is clearly, as Mr. Ganesan lays out, a lot of realistic view. There is a lot of ground to be covered on the policy front. I'm sure all of the audience in this room today resonated with the China comparison, particularly coming out of 2023. I think it's a pain that has hit all of us almost equally. There is clearly a lot to be done. I'll keep moving a bit fast because I know this is the end of the day and this is between you and home. So the next part, equally critical as policy, is infrastructure. I invite Mr. Pankaj Mehta to talk about what are some of the critical infrastructure that India needs to be able to scale the sector as envisioned.
Thank you, Vish. Thanks for organizing this very important critical part. Actually, before I address the infrastructure part, I wanted to do a little math for the group here. So to get to 2 trillion in 2047, you would need to grow, use the magic of compounding. And if you grow at 8-9% a year, you would get there. So that is not much of a stretch, I think. But to get to 3 trillion, you would have to be at 12% CAGR, which would be a little bit of a stretch. But I mean, we have illustrations, examples of how it has been done, for example, by China. So that it is easily doable. The other thing about the chemical industry is that it has triple growth drivers. One is, you saw from Mr. Ganesan's slides the amount of imports that are coming in. So import substitution is readily identifiable products and what needs to be produced to get there. Also, now with the global value chains, supply chains, looking at substitution of China being more than 10 times the size of India. So even if, let's say, 10% of China is diverted to India, you are going to be effectively doubling the Indian production or exports rather. So I think that is another driver. And of course, the economy is growing. So the internal demand, the purchasing power is growing. So the internal demand. So all three drivers are there for us to grow. In terms of the infrastructure, actually the story is quite good. You heard earlier in the construction chemicals session that lots of roads and airports and etc. are being built. That is the kind of a general overall infrastructure. Coming specifically to the chemical industry, to take from again an example of on the environmental front, which is the single most policy related aspect that is of concern to our industry. So having multiple deep sea discharge lines, I mean, it's amusing that the ocean is full of chlorides. So we should be able to discharge chloride brine solutions readily. There's lots of studies being done and lots of hurdles. Apparently our standards for deep sea discharge are much stricter than the Western norms. So those kinds of things. And earlier on, the zero liquid discharge was considered to be an appropriate means of handling effluent. But that increases your carbon footprint because you need energy to get rid of the water. But deep sea discharge doesn't do that. So now with the environmental as well as the carbon footprint factor, deep sea discharge lines are, I believe, critical. Effluent treatment plants. Then if you have a network of pipeline supply of materials, it makes it a lot more efficient, makes the industry a lot more efficient. So things like ethylene, propylene, chlorine, and such building blocks. If you have a network in a PCPIR, which we have always been looking at, that kind of infrastructure needs to be looked at. There's a private company, PIP, that is looking at kind of an environment like that. But on a much larger scale, needs to be done by a government entity. So what do you need to produce chemicals? Raw materials, energy, and manpower. So the other element would be infrastructure for skill development. So that is again a challenge that we face, especially in areas. Now the industry is concentrated in Gujarat and Dahej, especially. We have a lot of attrition because there's lack of supply of skilled people. So the infrastructure for education needs to be brought up. So while the general infrastructure of roads, airports, ports is coming up rapidly, there's industry-specific infrastructure that could help the growth rates. So that it's not impossible. I think it was a play on that with a dash between im and possible. So I am possible, I think, was the point I think the team was trying to make. Thanks for this opportunity.
Thanks a lot, Mr. Mehta. That was very tangible and practical and very actionable, I think, to think about our infrastructure priorities. I'll move on next to a theme that Mr. Ganesan touched upon earlier, but really deep diving on regulatory and clearance processes. I invite Mr. Suresh Kalra to talk about what could be the changes that could help us get to this level of capex that will be needed to get to $2 trillion of production.
Thank you, Vish, and good evening, everybody. So, before we go, I would say, Praveen, if you would have been our sales head, then I would have said you're one of the biggest sandbaggers. You know why? If you're already growing by 8% already in the last 20 years, and then you're giving us a target of growing 9% CAGR and saying that it is I am possible or impossible, so thanks. Okay, so all my sales guys know this in the company. So it is possibly one of the most reasonable targets we can talk about. And I would say, why even reasonable? If we are growing from last 20 years with all the problems that Ganesan Sahab has already expressed, and then now we are already sitting at a point of inflection in India, specifically because every time we compare the chemical industry in India, it has to be compared with China. Okay, that's for sure. That's a given. More or less, it's always a multiple of 10. I don't know how that multiple of 10 comes, but in my mind, even our currency is 10. Okay, so if you say Chinese yuan, it will be 10 rupees. Okay, everything is almost 10. Same as you look at, we are 220 billion, and it's 10 times China. Even with the growth rate, we are saying the same. However, that's still a very reasonable, or I would even say, sandbagging target, because it was the case when India was not that strong in terms of our infrastructure, in terms of regulatory, and I'll come to regulatory because that's the main topic. Now we have a lot of regulatory framework and compliances in picture, which I'm sure people sitting here in the chemical industry would know were not existing before. Okay, a lot of people I know in the chemical industry earlier were not having the required ETP and water treatment facilities, which I guess is getting more and more common across the industry. We are a multinational company, so of course we have, but I think a lot of Indian promoter companies and in general the SMEs also have very strong facilities around it. So that has definitely changed. So that regulatory framework, statutory framework is a minimum thing which is required under the overarching principles of safety and compliances. Along with that comes the third thing which you mentioned is how much is the ease of doing that business? How much is exactly what word you used is how much is the bureaucracy around it, right? Now that still exists. I will compare again China here, and I would put a little bit of my optimism here because I have handled China business for almost 10 years. One of my colleagues sitting here, he was head of supply chain for our China business. So the comparison with China, I can say for specifically, I mean, all the information is available on Google. I'm giving you the information which I have experienced myself handling the China business. We used to have 3 plants in China. When I was working with another company called Schenectady International, and now I work for hubergroup. That time we had a plant in Jinshan for antioxidants for polyolefin industry. We had a industrial resin and technified resins plant near Shanghai area, and one of the plant in Shandong areas for different product lines. And the issue there was, every time you want to enter the business in China, it was the easiest thing. You have a single window clearance for everything. In India, you have a lot of problems. You heard that, and I have faced that. All the time, handling chemical plants for many years now. We don't have a single window, rather we don't even have a 3 or 4 window, you have 10, 15 windows to go, okay? China has a single window plant for everything. Entry is very easy. The problem is to run the business profitably and exit, don't even think of, you can't exit a business once you enter into China, okay? I know a lot of companies who have never made money in China, and I have yet to see a multinational company in India who have lost money. Almost every multinational company has been in India in 25 years of my career. I've not seen them losing money. That's not the case in China. Okay, and that's all was happening from last 25 years when we were not at the point of inflection what we are today. So I would say our regulatory framework was not that strong, which is getting stronger. You might have heard of, some of you already would be working with ICMSR new guidelines which have come. I think 28th February was the in this year, 2024, was a gazette which has been issued. So we all have to provide every chemical which we are producing in India, buying in India, using in India, have to be registered on that portal now, ICMSR. Okay. Um, and with that, you also have to give all the ingredients and the safety sheets and things like. It's very, very detailed. Okay, we are still struggling how much detail we can provide without getting into an IP issues and things like that. But we all have to provide it one day. And India is getting into that chemical inventory listing, which is almost, I'll say, not exactly equivalent, but almost equivalent to the REACH regulations in Europe or K-REACH regulations. And every country has some kind of regulation. But I think it is good to learn the best practices from somebody who's already done, and we follow it. So I think that's something which we are getting into. So giving it, again, a summary, regulatory frameworks are getting stronger and stronger. India is at an inflection point because now people know around the world that they need a China plus one for real. It was China plus one being talked at least from last 15 years. Now it is actually real because the world doesn't have much of a choice. And we provide a much honest and integrity-based systems, specifically now, because now almost everything is digitized. All our data is digitized. Everything which we are producing, and we have 4 large plants in India, and Vapi we share almost a wall with Aarti there. We have a very large plant with one of the largest effluent treatment plants in that area, and all our effluents are being on a real-time basis monitored on the display outside my plant. Now, these all are the things which are not existing before. So I'm very happy with how the regulatory frameworks are moving, and I'm very happy with what opportunities which are going to come in the future, but I'm not very happy with the 9% CAGR. We possibly have to look at much higher. So with that note, I would say thank you, and let's listen the other people on the next issues. Thank you, Vish.
Thank you, Mr. Karla. So the target has moved. It is 3 trillion now. So the rest of the panel will talk about the 3 trillion economy on Mr. Karla's insistence. We spoke about the broader vision. We spoke about policy, regulatory, and infrastructure. But all discussions about the chemical industry in India have to consider the F factor, feedstock. Professor Yadav spoke about a future where we produce our own green feedstock. But in the interim, we do need feedstock, which we know is one of our biggest weaknesses. I invite Gaurav, Vyas to talk about how India could prepare itself in an era where we have to grow rapidly but without feedstock access.
Thanks, Vish. On the question of feedstock, I will start with what Professor Yadav told, that each atom should go into the product. So I will quickly wrap up. There are a couple of things we need to do. Maybe the list is long, even 8 to 10 things we have to do. The first thing which comes to my mind when we talk about feedstock is feedstock prioritization for the country. So the feedstock which is good for producing something must get priority. For example, gas should be diverted to fertilizers, coal for power production, and naphtha for petchem and for chemicals and for us. It is crime to produce power using imported naphtha. So this is this policy should come up as a country, that building block molecules should go into the chemicals. Secondly, for what Professor Yadav told, achieving carbon negative. For that front as well, we should have all the carbon molecules which comes from oil and gas or from the oil and gas feedstock should go into the polymers and other stocks rather than we use for them for producing steam, power, etc. So not just it's a ask from the policy maker to divert the feed to the right industry, but within the industry itself, we should not have a steam cracker. And even if it is a steam cracker, the steam should come from either renewable power or power by some other mean, but not naphtha. Or we should have electrification of cracker, or what Dr. Partha told, we can have even nuclear power for crackers or roto crackers. So first is feed prioritization. Second thing that comes to my mind is alternate to crude and natural gas. Again, what Professor Yadav told. We are not a country who are which is rich in crude or natural gas. So we should look after the alternate sources as well. Even if you take example of Reliance, we have a gasification facility, a huge gasification facility at Jamnagar. It is world's largest gasification facility, and we are doing petcoke gasification there. And similar approach can be adopted to have gasification of coal or gasification of biomass. But at the same time, we have a decarbonization targets. So when I am saying decarbonizing using gasification, we should also use the CO2 and capture that CO2 and put to some use. So it's not that I'm saying we go against the sustainability, but we see our own resources. If India is rich in coal, we should produce chemicals, petrochemicals out of coal, but use the CO2 produced from coal to some use. Maybe we can produce sustainable aviation fuel through CO2, or maybe e-chemicals, which sometime back Partha Mehta ji told. Another thing which Mr. Mehta told is clustering, or making PCPIR, or developing infrastructure. That is also an important step for feedstock, to have a feedstock advantage or feedstock security. Sometime back I was talking with Ankur, and maybe I do often talk with many people. At Reliance, we have ethylene and propylene, and we want to make PVC because country has a deficit in PVC. But for that, we do not have chlorine. And there are manufacturers in India who have surplus chlorine, and they want to divert chlorine, but we cannot have it. If we have a clustering facility in India, maybe a PCPIR like block, or we have a ease of or a greater collaboration between the industry, we can have a greater we can achieve greater things through feedstock security. Now, since we do not have chlorine, we are importing chlorine through Gulf nation, and we have created a joint venture in Gulf just for EDC. Then another thing that comes to my mind for feedstock is funding in cracker and refining business. We need government support, maybe PLIs or some tax breaks, etc. When we put up refining facility and cracker facility for production of chemicals and petrochemicals. If we see the projections after 2025 or 2030, there won't be there is a plateau happening for fuels, for gasoline and diesel. So if we are putting a FCC facility, which is a deep cracking facility for production of propylene and ethylene, we need at least some incentive or tax break, or maybe something which lowers down our capital investment, so that we have a secure building block supply for a downstream chain. Lastly, when we have a clustering approach or a PCPIR approach, whenever a new cracker or a new complex comes up, government can make a policy that mandatorily some 20 to 40% of feed should be diverted to building block, not for the captive use. This way it will develop the downstream industry, because not everyone can afford a refinery or a cracker, but there are so many downstream players or a specialty chemical player who need maybe building block like ethylene, propylene, styrene, or it could be even rock phosphate. So if cracker feed is cracker building blocks are diverted, we will see our country becoming self-sufficient in certain chemicals like oxo alcohol or super adsorbent polymer, for which we are completely dependent on imports. Then another thing which Professor Yadav told, bio-based building blocks. This is another thing which we can do for feedstock security. If we can produce feedstocks through 2G, 3G, 4G, or the bigger words which Professor Yadav told, ammonization, fermentation, and so many other words, this will really help our country, because in this way we will use our biomass, we will use our own feedstock to produce chemicals and petrochemicals and become self-reliant. And lastly is innovation. Again, I am taking lead out of my the other speakers which told. One of them was turquoise hydrogen, which Dr. Partha Mehta told. If we can split methane, and when I am saying methane, it can come from various sources. It can come from coal, it can come from biomass gasification, it can come from any other source. And if we can split methane, then also we can produce chemicals or petrochemicals out of that. Then we can have recycled feed in the cracker. If we can recycle our plastics, or what again Professor Yadav told, if we can depolymerize and or maybe chemically break the plastics and recycle it back to the cracker, then we will have feedstock security. And lastly, we need certain policy frameworks which will really help in making or even surpassing the target which we have. There can be certain policy interventions like government to government collaboration on feedstock security, or there could be some other things from the government, like we have an inverted tax structure. If some of we have a 10% duty on naphtha which is imported. If we take our own example only, we have our own ethane facilities in US, and when we do import, we have to pay duties on that. However, if we have a finished product from somewhere, maybe China or whatsoever, then the countervailing duty or a custom duty on that product is lower than that. So a building block is charged at a higher duty, while a finished product is charged at a lower duty. If that is the case, then we will not have a feedstock advantage, or there is an incentivization to import the finished product rather than produce in India. So we need to change the inverted duty structure. We need to make our feedstock free from duties, while apply countervailing duties or more duties on the finished product which are not indigenously produced. And lastly, another feedstock advantage can come from usage of CO2, or when we capture our CO2 produced from any facility, be it from power plant, be it from refinery, or be it from anywhere, and use that CO2 to produce ethylene and other products. And these are also proven technologies, but not economically feasible as of now. So we need to invest in R&D and maybe do it scale, so that we have a e-SAF or e-ethylene, e-propylene. That's all from my end. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Gaurav. That was a comprehensive overview of everything possible to the feedstock scenario in the country. I'll move on to the next topic. Whenever we do the China comparison, after feedstock, one of the top points that always comes in question is the cost of capital. We've done this benchmarking time and again. Chinese companies do have access to affordable capital for their projects. The cost of capital in India is high. We all know that. I invite Dr. Jaimin, Vasa to talk about what could be done by the government and by financial institutions to improve the cost of capital for India as we look at this expansion.
Good evening, everybody, and thank you very much for giving the opportunity to me in this wonderful seminar. As Dr. said that India to reach 30 trillion, then naturally chemical has to go to 2 trillion. I agree with you. I also agree with Pankaj. He said we need three main things: raw material, infrastructure, and manpower. Yes, everything is available. Two things which I would be highlighting is, number one is cost of money. If we don't have the money at a very competitive price and competitive rate, we cannot compete anybody. Even you also buy the money at a higher rate, you will not be able to compete with your own also. So what about you think of China? And second thing which I would like to highlight is MSME, which from the whole things we have not discussed, which is if we want to grow, today 95% of the industries are micro, small and medium enterprise. And they are the supporting industries for this. Today MSME contribute 29% of GDP of India. Now if India has to reach, recently Mr. Ganesan has shown the graph that this is the GDP we are contributing in after 35 years or 30 years, how much GDP we have to reach. So all these point together, feedstock is right, technology is right, but money. Now see, Government of India and financial institutions can collaborate in several ways to provide a low interest. What we want is a low interest rate investment options for the chemical industry. Well, you know that capex is very high in chemical industry. So I think my one suggestion is the government can directly subsidize interest rates on loans provided by the financial institutions to chemical industry players, and this reduces the cost of the capital for business, making investment more attractive and feasible. Secondly, the credit guarantee scheme should be introduced. Financial institutions can be encouraged to offer loans to the chemical industry at a lower rate of interest if the government provides credit guarantees. And this mitigates the risk of the lenders, allowing them to offer a better terms of the interest to the industry player, which is very important. Third is, my suggestion is specialized financing program. Establishing the specialized financing program tailored for the chemical sector can ensure that the financial products must be unique needs and challenges of this industry. This might include the longer repayment periods and grace periods for the loan repayments. Next is tax incentives. The government can provide tax incentives for financial institutions that offer loans to the chemical industry at a lower interest rates. And this encourages the financial institutions to participate actively in funding the sector. Secondly, public-private partnership. Collaborative efforts between government entities and private financial institutions through PPP models leverage resources and expertise from both the sectors to provide cost-effective financing solutions. Now, what is the importance of financial supports? Number one is capital intensity. The chemical industry typically requires substantial investment in infrastructure, technology, and research. Now, lowering the cost of capital through low interest rate loans reduces the financial burden on companies and encourage them to undertake expansion and modernization projects, which we compete with China also. Now the competitiveness. Now access to the affordable financing enhances the competitiveness of Indian chemical industries in the global market. It allows them to upgrade their facilities, adopt the new technologies and improve efficiency, which are very crucial for staying very much competitive in an increasingly globalized industry. Next is innovation, which our many learned people said, that innovation and sustainability. Financial supports can facilitate investment in sustainable practices and technologies within the chemical sector. And this includes initiatives to reduce environmental impact, improve energy efficiency, and comply with the stricter regulatory standards, which are becoming increasingly important globally. And last, job creation and economic growth. The chemical industry is a significant contributor to the employment and economic growth in India. By supporting industry expansion and modernization, financial institutions and the government can stimulate job creation across the value chain from manufacturing to research and development. In short, the collaborative efforts between the government of India and financial institutions to provide the low interest rate investment options are very crucial for fostering the growth, competitiveness and sustainability within the chemical industry. And this financial support not only benefit individual companies but also contribute to the broader economic development goals and clusters, and including job creation and enhance the global marketplace. My request is to the organizer, out of this all discussion, you should prepare one's concept note, and we should also give some ideas and report to the government also. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Vasa. I fully agree with this. Praveen, I think there is enough wisdom being shared in this table to form the future roadmap for the Indian chemical industry. We should share it formally. I'll move on to the next topic. I'm also conscious of time. All the speakers before briefly touched on sustainability as a key pillar of India's 2047 chemicals industry journey. I invite my friend Ankur to talk about what are ways in which India's chemical industry can not just comply but also set the benchmark for sustainability globally.
Yeah, thanks, Vish. I'll be quick. I think there is a business aspect to sustainability, and there is an aspect which is essential to our overall comprehensive growth. Now, when I really dissect sustainability, why it is important, then I start looking at what is an exposure of Indian chemical industry in terms of exports. US doesn't need us. China is balanced and self-dependent. Europe is our natural market. So at any point of time, our export dependency in most of the value-added chemical would be on Europe. And last week I was in Delhi, there was a huge discussion on the CBAM. The European Commission tax authorities were there. And in 2 years, the EU emission trading scheme will be gone. So all of us who's trying to get certification, our carbon footprint will not be there. And in one shot, the CBAM would be levied on us. Now the chemical is there in the list from 2026 onwards. So a lot of large chemical company will start working on reporting for the CBAM as well. Now, this is not the one of the case which will come up in our conversation so far as our natural export markets are concerned. It will keep happening. China is sitting very balanced because they have a strong domestic market. US does not need it because they have an energy balance situation. Middle East is sitting pretty comfortable. So the real importance so far as the sustainability in terms of my profit and loss account would come very heavy on Indian market. That's one. Second thing which comes up, that sustainability more than the buzzword has become more of a license to operate. Yes, our practices are, I would say, broadly at par with European standard. And we see a lot of appreciation from our European counterparts so far as our operating procedures are there. But there is a lot to do. Now let's come back to the domestic market on the manufacturing side. There are typically 4 elements of sustainability which you can always counter. My raw material, my energy, production process, and supply chain. Unfortunately, we are struggling in all 4. We do not have enough feedstock. Greening of feedstock still miles away. There is a cost element to it. Energy, there are a lot of bulk chemical which are energy intensive. A couple of companies have started getting a lot of hybrid green power, but there are 2 problems. There is not so uniform policy on green power across the state, which actually make western part of the country a natural play to set up the chemical complexes. Second element, the hybrid power. We often debate that should a chemical company be in a green power business? Answer is no. No large company in the world has actually into utility business. And the capex is high. And therefore, it is imperative on the government to form a hybrid power policy where the capexes are shared, the power being transferred, or at least, if not better than the coal-based power plant, it should be at least at par in long run, at least on a 25-year PPA basis. The second element is your process chemistry. Unfortunately, in our R&D ecosystem, we are not working a lot on cleaning up our processes, especially the effluent prone. I'll give one example. Hydrogen as a carrier. There is a company, all of you know, Evonik. They are one of the leaders into peroxide-based chemistry. They set up a lab in Germany where they are trying to see whether oxygen as a carrier can actually use to clean a lot of petro feedstock-based chemical processes. And that's how they have been able to clean up the effluent generated from a hydrogen peroxide plant from propylene route to the tune of 30%. So there is a lot of R&D work need to be done on a process chemistry. The last one is supply chain. Now, here is a problem. We do not relook at the policy which we have enacted 10, 20 years ago. Now, Gaurav raised the issue of chlorine transportation. India is only country where perhaps more than 60% of the volume of chlorine still moved by road. In most of the chemical cluster, whether it's Ludwigshafen, Houston, Jurong, it's either by pipeline or by railway transportation. Now, after Bhopal gas strategy, the government has taken a call that chlorine will not move via rail tracks. And so far that policy has never been reviewed. The amount of tonners and cylinders of the hazardous product like chlorine are moving on the road can be taken care of. If there is a rail rack arrangement, maybe what Gaurav's problem is that chlorine need not to be imported in form of EDC and it can easily move via rail racks. But that is not something which is there. Apart from the supply chain integration, if you look at the global chemical cluster, be it Antwerp, Ludwigshafen, or Houston, Dahej by design is the least structured one. You do not have an aggregation strategy. There is no desal availability. There is no integrated pipeline access to the utility. There is no anchor tenant concept. For example, even if you go to the old European chemical complexes, there is a one big company, whether it's BSF, Evonik, Lanxess, setting up an anchor plant, and they are taking care of the rest of the utilities for rest of them. These are the facilities are not available, which actually, in spite of Dahej being such a big cluster, is not sustainable in long run. And that's going to create a problem because at any point of time, you would always be fighting for the cost competitiveness of China. We do not have a government subsidized funding. We do not have a technology sophistication. And therefore, these are the basic things which we can actually look for sustainability. Only thing which European chemical ecosystem value in us is transparency and ability to go much more sustainable than China. Now, if you don't work on it, maybe that advantage will go away. And honestly, at last, when I really look at 2 trillion or 3 trillion target, my concern is that this growth should not come from the price, it should come from the volume. And the China is pumping money on the volume. They don't care about price because they believe prices they're going to dictate once they have enough volume and market share in the market. Imagine if we do not solve the feedstock issue, we would still relying heavily on specialty chemical export to make up for this 2 trillion. And that majority will come from price growth, not volume growth. So these are my 2 cents on sustainability.
Thanks a lot, Ankur. It is a carry scenario of being purely price-led. I agree, it has to be very volume-led, especially after the last 3-4 years of capex that we've seen in China. The point is well made. The last question for this session is really focused on the D word, digital, which we haven't heard as of yet. It is very clear that the chemicals industry of 2047 will need to be digital first, whatever that implies. I'm inviting Rajesh, Kamat to talk about what the digital future of India's chemical industry could look like.
So that's a pretty big question and probably we'll need an entire day to really answer that question. And I realize that I'm the last person standing between us and drinks. So I'll keep this short. I've jotted down a few points. So while there could be many things that could be done, The ones that I have jotted down are really the ones that we have tried to implement, within the organization. So in that sense, there are use cases and there are also learnings in terms of, what works, what doesn't work, what are the challenges that one sees. I think what one must understand is that, the basic technology for manufacturing chemicals, let's say by and large, is mature. By and large, it doesn't really differentiate one from the other because, that technology could be generally available. So what really differentiates and makes you competitive is how well you leverage that technology and how efficiently you are able to operate. And that's where digital really comes into play because there's a lot that can be done, and there have been many use cases where simply by leveraging analytics, simply by leveraging data, one is able to extract anywhere from 10 to 20% additional efficiency or reduced costs in a lot of processes. But for all of this to happen, I think the core of this is really data. How good your data is. Today we have organizations, and I can talk for the ones that I have seen. We are swimming in data. But the question is that how do we use it? The data needs to be clean. The data needs to have a single source of truth. And we have seen systems where if you take data from 3 different sources, none of them will match. So what we have done is, we have embarked on a data maturity framework. It's called DATOM. It's a proprietary framework which has been developed by TCS for our group. And that basically, talks about all the basic parameters of data, and including, for example, the quality of data, the latency of data, how accurate the data is, how recent the data is, and also the layers on top of it, like for example, governance, analytics, so on and so forth. So essentially, a framework which helps our organization leverage data to the best possible manner. Now, if you talk of digital, this is something which really can be used across the spectrum, meaning across the complete value chain. So if you start, let's say, with manufacturing, again, there are a host of things, and for the last several years, we've been talking about, Industry 4.0 that equally applies to the chemical industry as well. We have, sensors connected, pretty much to every single machine which you can find in the organization, and these sensors keep on pumping out data. So there's a huge, massive amount of data and historical data which is available. So what do we do with it? Which is where, this big data analytics comes in. What we have done, and I'm sure this will be useful for most others as well, is, and really, see, what has happened if you go back in history prior to this big data analytics wave, the local optimization was by and large achieved, meaning, you take a machine, by and large you tweak the parameters, that machine is working very well. And that has happened, across, but these have all been optimized in silos. What big data helps us to do is, really optimize the system. Because now we have data for many days, months, years, very accurate data, and we are able to correlate, right? And what we have done, as a case example is, we have created digital twins, and we have looked at data to create, what in digital parlance is called as the golden badge. What that means is that, you look at all the possible parameters across the entire end-to-end manufacturing chain and see what is it that you need to tweak so that, you get the best quality product, you get the best quality product in the most efficient manner, and you create a golden badge which says, these are the parameters, and we try to achieve that. And over a period of time, you're not even only able to achieve it, but you're actually able to exceed it as well. And that's, that's what one gets, as we become more and more mature in data analytics. Second area, would be around robotics, including, usage of drones. Now, drones is an area which has very recently come up in a very, very big way. And this is something that you can use, not just in manufacturing, but, for safety purposes, for monitoring and managing your projects, so many applications. We have got, in one of our sister companies, which is into, let's say, construction in remote areas. They are very effectively using drones to actually, monitor, and, you could create a kind of a command center far away, and using drones, you can actually monitor day-to-day progress. Similarly, within our plants, we can use drones beyond project management, even for day-to-day activities, in accessing places, like for example, chimneys or, tall reactors. Something going wrong, it's very unsafe for a human to actually climb up and, actually see and inspect it. You could use drones and get the data in a very accurate manner, in a very cost-effective manner as well. Third is in terms of, this whole area, and, we've had presentations earlier around mobility, mobile devices, wearable devices. Now, what that makes is that, every workman really becomes like our, command center. At the same time, because that data is digital and it can be transmitted, you could actually have a command center or a monitoring center. It could be within the plant, it could be outside the plant, it could be 5,000 kilometers outside the plant. So what that means is that you are no longer constrained by finding talent. Suppose you have a plant at a very remote location. You are no longer constrained in finding a talent, to go to that remote location and work on that. You could have a center, the whole work from home concept. Just leverage that and have your set of experts at a location where you can find them, and they can do an equally good job thanks to this digital technology. Next, if we move ahead, let's say if you talk of supply chain and even sales, here again, we are talking about providing customers, end-to-end visibility, providing customers ease of transacting business. So automating the entire order to cash process. Only the normal transactions, simply go through. Only the exceptions, would need some kind of human intervention. Similarly, if you talk of supply chain, there are many things which can be done digitally. For example, there are platforms available where you can actually track your shipment. You know exactly where your material is. You know exactly, at what point it's going to reach you. So all those technologies are available, and I think, the world has moved to that level. And in India also, we are seeing a significant amount of adoption of all these technologies. Now, having said all of this, I think what also becomes critical, in addition to data quality, is, protecting data and ensuring that the data is not misused, and also the right kind of data is available to right kind of people at the right time. So we need to have very good and strong governance mechanisms which provide for this. And this is also, important, especially if you are doing cross-border transactions. I think all of that. And of course, I'm not, there are many, many more things. There could be blockchains, which could help you improve your supply chain efficiencies and also integrate better with global supply chains. There are many challenges along the way, and we have all would have experienced, the challenges that we experience in implementation, be it, let's say, ERP upgrade or, implementing, let's say, a CRM package. There are challenges in terms of adopting to your specific needs. There are challenges in terms of finding the right talent to take that through. And also in terms of adoption. There's always, and adoption also because, you have invested a lot in legacy. People are very comfortable in working the way they work. But we need to overcome those hurdles, if one has to really leverage data and digital technologies to, take leapfrog and become more competitive and compete with the world. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Rajesh. Thank you. That is a comprehensive overview. Across this panel, hopefully you got a good flavor, a tour de force of the pathway for India to get to 2047 and a $3 trillion industry. Professor Yadav laid out a really inspiring vision of a green, a fully sustainable, a fully feedstock independent Indian chemical industry. All subsequent speakers spoke about the building blocks to get there. We need the policy framework, as Mr. Ganesan so eloquently spoke about. We do need the infrastructure that Mr. Pankaj Mehta spoke about. We need clearances at a pace that we are not doing right now, or else we'll not be able to build at the pace at which we need to. We need capital at a very affordable way, or else we'll be left behind in the investment game compared to the industry. Our entire journey needs to be sustainable, and that is going to be an entire evolution on its own. We need to think about feedstock in a holistic fashion, starting with all the building blocks in place and starting with the long term in view. And we need to have a digital mindset throughout. So across our entire panel, hopefully you got a flavor of what a 25-year roadmap for India could look like. And on that note, I thank all of you for staying back well beyond the planned hour. And I thank all my fellow panelists for their words of wisdom and really deep insights into how the industry could evolve. Thank you all.